This is the Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. We have a great show today. At any time, you can email the program at messiahhour@gmail.com or the station at Israel Sports and News Radio at gmail.com. Many people have been discussing the quote-unquote fourth blood moon scheduled tonight. Tonight, of course, the first night of Sukkot, 15th of Tishrei, the Feast of Tabernacles. And we've discussed the four blood moons for over a year and a half, a long time in this program. And right now, very excited to have on my first guest ever of this program. He'll be back on to discuss the fourth blood moon of this particular cycle. A renowned historian. He's the author of several books, including Crash Course in Jewish History, and you can find his website, kenspiro.com. Back to the program, Rabbi and historian, Rabbi Ken Spiro. Rabbi, how you doing out there?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So when I first interviewed you a year and a half ago about this topic, we looking at things now, it looks like the world is in a little bit of a different place, would you say?
Absolutely, for sure. A lot of stuff has taken place in the last year especially with what's going on in Iran and the continuing, I would say, volatile world financial situation. So things are definitely heating up. It's looking a lot more scary and real than it did a year and a half ago.
And for those who haven't heard the episodes, and if you want to hear after this program, you can go to my YouTube channel and check it out, Messiah Hour, and click in on YouTube. But for those who have not heard it so far, can you explain the general concept of the four blood moons in this particular cycle?
So the blood moon, first of all, the idea of blood moon comes from a full lunar eclipse because of the wavelength of light, red light being the longest. When there's a full eclipse, the moon appears to be red. Hence the term blood. But that's a normal lunar eclipse. But what we have is a tetrad, when you get four lunar eclipses in a row with no intermediate partial lunar eclipses, which is what we had, which is a much more rare phenomena. And the fact that this one is falling out, we've had the last one is going to be tonight, which is the first night of the holiday of Sukkot, the Feast of the Tabernacles. And before that, we had one on the first night of Passover, which was not visible in Israel. Then we had another one on the first night of Sukkot before, and then on the first one was the first night of Passover a year ago, which also wasn't visible in Israel. This one, by the way, will be visible in Israel, and the moon is extremely close to the earth, so you have a rare combination of a blood moon tetrad visible in Israel with the moon appearing to be much larger than usual because it's significantly closer to the earth than it normally is. And again, the question is, what's the connection historically? It's a fairly rare phenomenon, and sometimes we go for centuries without having it. In this century, or in the 20th century, the last time we had it was in 1949, right after the War of Independence, and in 1967, after the Six-Day War. So there seems to be a direct connection between these phenomena and what's going on specifically in the Middle East and Israel history, even though Jewish sources don't talk that much about it. Christians and Christian sources seem to be much more interested in focusing on this. And also, to throw in one more interesting piece of information, it talks about in the prophet Yoel in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, there's a famous description which is used by more than one of the prophets where it talks about the moon turning to blood on the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. So again, here you have that actual blood moon terminology specifically associated with the end of days, with the final showdown, we say, between good and evil that precedes the coming of the Messiah. Now, I'm not saying, like I say, I'm not a prophet. If I was, I'd be working in the stock exchange. But so I'm very wary about making predictions of what's going on, but certainly there seem to be big wheels turning up there, and then what's happened during this cycle, the tetrad, certainly has opened up a lot of possibilities, and we seem to be significantly closer to that final act than we were even a year ago.
Yes, indeed. And you talked about the Christian population being very intrigued by this. They have been intrigued. Pastor Hagee even wrote a book about this general cycle, the cycle right now, saying something in Israel is going to change. And why do you think the non-Jewish world seems to be a little more interested than the quote-unquote Jewish world?
Well, two things. One is that the significance of the moon in terms of its prophetic impact is quite limited in Judaism, except for these quotes I mentioned from the book of Joel. Jews aren't as much into looking at the heavens for signs about what's going down here on earth. And just in general, the Christian community, especially the evangelical community, which is so into the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and so into end of days scenarios, definitely makes a bigger meal out of it, so to speak, than the average Jew. Certainly, the average religious Jew has little or no interest in any of this. You'll see there's no buzz going on in the Jewish world, but there's a much bigger buzz going on in the Christian world.
All right, again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi Ken Spiro. We're talking about this blood moon cycle, which is going to end, this current one, tonight, first night of Sukkot. So let's just kind of talk about the elephant in the room, the Iran deal, which was basically finalized not too long ago. I think maybe a week and a half ago. They decided in the end not to have enough votes to set up anything that would be dramatic. It's kind of done. How terrified, scared you are of this Iran deal that President Obama set up, or are people making too much of a big deal over it?
No, I don't think. Look, it doesn't mean Iran's going nuclear tomorrow, but it's very scary in that. I always say as a historian, there's two big lessons we learned from the 20th century. One is only democracies make real peace. That no democracy's ever gone to war with another democracy is a fact. And you don't do deals with dictators. What Barack Obama did was a repeat of Neville Chamberlain in 1938. Rather than stand up and oppose evil, give into it. Make a bogus, making deals with dictatorships, whether it's Hitler or Iran, is not worth the paper that they're written on. So in what U.S., which is supposed to be the superpower that protects freedom and democracy in this world, has done, is basically back down and allowed what is the most dangerous terrorist state in all of human history, in my opinion, making the Soviet Union or the Nazis seem like a joke. Especially, I say, people who don't care about dying and think they're going to get 72 virgins, and by bringing Armageddon to the world, they're going to hasten the redemption, are not people you want to give weapons of mass destruction to, especially when they openly call for using them against not only Israel but against the United States. And the third lesson that I say we should learn from modern history, or just in history in general, is to take people like that seriously. People like bin Laden and Hitler, they practice what they preach. They don't have to worry about being reelected. They don't have to say popularist slogans. So you put it all together, and we see that the world has taken one giant step closer to allowing the potentially most dangerous regime on the planet Earth to become a nuclear power within a few years. So obviously it is scary. It is especially scary for Israel because, we the Jewish people have learned that when people say they hate us and want to kill us, that they tend to follow up with their threats. And we've also learned that, sadly, we can't count on the non-Jewish world to protect us. So all that Obama has done is A, aided a terrorist nation in coming closer to becoming a nuclear power, and B, most likely pushed Israel into having to act. And since the military option is the last one you want to pursue, by not pursuing the economic option of isolating Iran and bringing Iran down, and the Iranian government economically was teetering on the edge. The Iranian street is very pro-Western. Believe it or not, Iran is not an Arab country. They have a middle class. They have a long history of culture and intellectual, and that's a country that could have easily been tipped peacefully, or possibly with an internal uprising, but without an external war, to overthrow the existing government. But by doing what he did, he basically caved in, and that's very, very scary. So it may not be around the corner right after this blood moon, but again, we've taken a much bigger step closer to a very dangerous situation, not just for Israel, but for the entire world.
And talk about also the development of ISIS, which also occurred during this year-and-a-half period. Before the first interview of this program, no one had any idea what ISIS was. They didn't exist. Now they do exist. That's come in the last year and a half. Talk about what you think ISIS will do in the near future.
So ISIS, ironically, they're grabbing all the headlines because they're pretty sensational in their brutality. But as a serious threat to the world, the most warped aspect of what has gone on is you now have not only the U.S. backing down and letting Iran go